Ego Hour acknowledges the traditional owners of the land upon which we record, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation,
and the Wadawurrung people of the Kulin Nation.
We pay our respects to the elders past, present and emerging.
Get down, it's Ego Hour.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Good Brother.
And I'm Lil Silky.
And welcome to Ego Hour, the show where we deliver objectively true film reviews. It's at the time of when we film.
Anything said over the next 60 minutes probably will stand up in a court of law. And definitely, though, any argument you find yourself in with a film school student.
These reviews are non-negotiable,
non-refundable,
and nondescript. So, let's talk about
In the Mood for Love. Pretty good. Released on the 20th of May 2000 in Hong Kong, In the Mood for Love, also known by its Transylvanian release title, In the Mood for Noodles, is the story of Mrs. Chan and Mr. Chow, who move into neighbouring apartments and whose lives quickly become entwined when they find out their partners are cheating together. The film's budget is not readily available, but production was extensive and filming alone took 15 months, and an economic crisis required the filmmakers to find new investors in the middle of this period. Fortunately, the film was a critical success, being nominated for the Palme d'Or at Cannes and winning Tony Leung the Best Actor award at the festival, and eventually leading to a box office of $12.8 million. The film clocks in with a runtime of 98 minutes and may just leave you wondering, what would $30 get you at a brothel?
Nailed it. So
Here we go. Okay.
very special episode.
Yes, again. We would like to welcome back the unfathomable? That's not
The
description.
immovable object.
The archaic.
Are these compliments? Or?
Yeah. The wonderful Ben. Or aka Bad Brother. Welcome, Ben.
Thank you. I don't know how I earned the name Bad Brother, but
Yeah. Well, we've got Good
Simple
Brother.
process of elimination.
Yeah.
making you like average brother or just brother?
Chum, buddy, champ. Yeah, welcome.
Alright, are we doing the how you doings? That's the only question.
Yeah, it's a guest role.
Hey girl, I know it's been a while, but I just need to ask you something.
How you feeling? Girl, tell me how you feeling.
So, Ben, how are you feeling?
I'm doing well. Just got out of lockdown here in Melbourne again, but
Little circuit breaker.
little circuit breaker.
Little 5-day holiday.
5-day holiday, yeah. So spirits are high.
Yeah, that's good.
How are you guys?
Yeah, we're good. You don't need to ask that.
This is the latest time a pod has started, so it's
Is that true?
a bit saucy. I mean, look, everyone who knows me knows that I'm usually in bed by 9:30, so this is going to be rough.
Okay. This pod has been a long time in the making. Wong Kar Wai is famous within this family circle for because back in first year university, way back in 2017, I was handed a task, and it wasn't just any task. It was describe, research, and present an oral presentation on one director that we are filming in our film studies class. And one of the films we covered was Chungking Express by Wong Kar Wai. What followed you wouldn't believe, because turns out Wong Kar Wai was one of the best choices to get. So I can distinctly remember they were giving out directors, and there are obviously famous names because it was supposed to be a film class where they covered just like basically classic films that you should see, sort of. So we had like Kubrick in 2001, but that was end of semester. I hadn't seen it yet, so it wasn't my favorite film yet. Yeah, I know, a bit of insight.
Was it your favorite film when you watched it in film class?
Funny thing, I was probably going to say this till the 2001 podcast, but I remember watching it and being like, this is amazing, but I'm ready for it to end. And I know I'm going to like it on second watch. I'm going to appreciate the weird part with all the colors and shit like that more the second time. And fortunately, that held up. But yeah, so we watched Chungking Express in class. Hadn't seen it when I did the presentation though, so saved that for the class because I was a few weeks into it. There were other people like not Katherine Heigl.
Famous director Katherine
I
Heigl.
must see
blanking.
films, obviously.
Hurt Locker.
Yeah, Catherine Bigelow.
And there's also the independent director, which we discussed this with Ben last week, different Ben. Anyway, so a few different famous directors, and I was like, Wong Kar Wai, who's this guy? I like his look. I don't know if you've seen what he dresses like, but he wears like sunglasses and then like a tracksuit all the time. It's a good look. And yeah, so I got him. But then, so the first film that Ben helped me with my studies for this Wong Kar Wai presentation because
Helping being watch movies with
yeah,
Tom.
effectively
so
we had to
just happy to help.
just talk about like their signature moves and stuff like that. And the first one we watched was My Blueberry Nights, which is his 2007
Oh,
film.
you've seen that?
Yeah.
Interesting.
And it's his English film,
Only English film so far?
I believe so. And it's really bad. It's not good.
Really bad.
Yeah. It's just like I think
Nora Jones is the lead in it, isn't she?
yes, the blues singer, and Jude Law's in it, and they eat blueberry, and it like effectively it doesn't work, and it works for the same reason that this film does work. Coming out on a limb here, boys.
It doesn't work for the same reason this film does work.
Yeah. Well, basically, the magic of this film does not translate to the Western market. It's effectively what I'd say.
Do you think it's the English language or the Western setting?
A bit of both. Like, I think, well, the better answer is the Western setting and Western cultures and stuff like that. But the absurd amount of this charm is from not understanding the language, I think, in this film. And it's just like, this film is set in with Hongkonese characters. In Hong Kong, it is. And they're speaking a foreign language, and it's like, I don't know, it seems more romantic rather than your own language. And when you slap Americans in there and get Americans to do it, it's a little less special. That's all I'm saying.
They just kind of bounced around like unimportant America, right?
Yeah. And then she came in and ate blueberry pie every night, and it was a romantic build-in moment. Like, similar to how they eat noodles in this, but, you know, pie is just less exciting than noodles. Anyway, so I did really well on the assignment, got a good mark, but it meant that I watched this film, I watched Fallen Angels, I watched Happy Together. Anyway, fortunately, this is film school doing its job. And it introduced me to a great director. And then we've been talking about watching Wong's movies for a long time. And unfortunately, they're not on YouTube anymore. They used to just be on YouTube.
Oh, interesting.
Like, no copyright or, you know, just illegally. And it was great. But then now we had to find an alternative way in.
Which is Canopy.
Canopy. So, yeah, how would the listeners watch this movie?
They could rent it. They could pay for it.
From where?
You mean you can't rent it on YouTube?
I couldn't.
Ah.
Okay, well, here's our inside trick. Get a Canopy account.
Get your brother.
Canopy is a free film viewing software, but know someone who goes to Melbourne Uni, log in and get the library verified by them, and then watch it, because Melbourne Uni, thank you for this one.
The film school student couldn't get the bloody film.
There were 5 movies on there, and one of them was not Wong Kar Wai, so very disappointing.
What was there? A Goofy movie,
Parent Trap.
Shrek 4.
Yeah, so, well,
Classics.
yeah, they've obviously changed the course and modernized it a bit. Anyway, so you got to watch this film, though. This is a strong recommendation in film literacy, I'd say.
All right. And we're going to probably get more douchey than that, but just heads up.
Yeah, so that's our context. So we watched it. And I said to Nick, this is the Wong Kar Wai film that everyone talks about. So I was almost hesitant to do it because it's so famously good. But, I thought, fuck it. I want to watch this film again. It's a good film. So we watched it.
Here we are. Yeah.
It's been a long time coming, watching it again. We've
Yeah.
sort of romanticized watching the Wong Kar Wai films for a couple of years,
Yeah.
but never got around to it.
Well, and it's like you can't even buy them on DVD or Blu-ray because they're too indie, and so they're actually expensive, It's like when I spent like $30 or whatever to order Apocalypse Now.
From like the UK.
No, Hearts of Darkness. Yeah, Hearts of Darkness Blu-ray because I couldn't find it on the internet. Turns out it's on SBS now.
Yeah.
So, goodness. But
SBS really comes through the goods.
this has definitely been on SBS at a time. It's just the amount of time. And the worst part about SBS, though, is that they show you the movies that were on it. So then you'll click on the link and it's like expired. And you're just like, why you got to rub this in? Like,
well, here's the thing is that I got a VPN recently. So I was like, cool, I can have access to pretty much any movie. Like 50% of other Netflixes are exactly the same as ours.
bad.
Yeah, well, I mean, they don't have any extra content. Japan's Netflix so far has come through the goods.
Popping off.
It has every King Kong you could dream of, which
No.
not King Kong, sorry, I mean Godzilla, and I'm pretty sure the King Kong
Yes,
as well.
please.
I thought anyway, because we're hyping up this
You
Godzilla
gotta
v
do
Kong
your
episode that's
research
coming.
before the fight.
Yeah.
So I've got to watch all 30 Godzilla movies.
We're gonna lock in. We're gonna grab a bit of sesame oil and a few noodles and
Sesame soup, isn't it? Sesame sauce.
Sesame syrup.
syrup. Wow, Ben with the fact check.
I'm assuming it's sesame oil, which Tom went ham on with dinner before.
I had to do my research for the film, so I had a healthy dose of sesame oil on my stir fry for dinner.
You're welcome. I cooked it.
Kong, just to plug it. Anything you want to plug?
v. Wong.
Kong v. Wong. That's a good one. So, any context for you?
I had never seen a Wong Kar Wai film before, but it's funny. Like, I was like, I'm expecting big things from you, Tom, because you've done this assignment, and you're like, oh, it was a first year assignment. It was like a PowerPoint presentation. Like, I didn't do any research properly.
If you want to
watch
know
the films.
about the thorough analysis of Boys in the Hood, pretty good with that one. Coffee as well. That was that project.
Animal Kingdom.
Animal Kingdom compared to Romper Stomper. That's actually a good essay. I feel like in terms of the Australian.
Maybe we'll do a bonus episode where Tom rereads his essays, and and the viewers can judge.
Can decide. You can grade me, and I got good grades, by the way.
So, God, so self-important. So what? Yeah, I hadn't seen it. We were going to go see
As
a film
tears
of
go
his
by.
at Acme. Sorry.
As tears go by.
Which is his first, right?
Yeah,
So we
at
haven't seen
Acme,
it.
but then
Circuit breaker.
and then yeah,
Here we are.
Uncle Dan made the call, and then we stayed home, and then we watched this. And I wanted to watch Rosemary's Baby, but I'm just saying we'll probably watch it next week, hopefully.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I'm just gonna get stuck into it because Ben's seen
Because
it.
we're waffling.
Oh, Ben, we're waffling.
Same background to Tom, apart from doing the assignment, which you've famously heard about.
It was a good assignment.
So
One girl presented on Stanley Kubrick came in with a Clockwork Orange t-shirt. Pretty nice touch. I forgot to come in with my Wong Kar Wai Adidas tracksuit and sunglasses.
I mean, statistically speaking, you're probably wearing the carp shirt.
Wow. I'm going to try and merch this off eventually when we get big enough.
You mean you're gonna sell the one you're wearing because it smells like sweat
It's going to be...
and noodles?
What rhymes with carbs? And it's going to have me with a baseball bat cartoon on the back. Anyway.
This movie is, I think we're on a bit of a, I say this, I feel a bit enlightened cinematography wise, I'm going to say, as a movie consumer.
And what else was there? I feel like you had a very important cinematography experience in your life just recently.
I was on a film shoot with
Nick
Tom.
was on a music video shoot. And you want to see someone who knows how to use a camera, don't show up to one of my sets. It makes you appreciate what good lighting looks like.
If you want to see a man who knows how to use a roll of sticky tape, I'm your guy.
Yeah.
I will tape anything to anything. No questions asked. Anyway, but I don't know. It's nice seeing Tom holding a camera.
Yeah.
He had the Doc Ock arm.
The
which is
easy
cool.
rig. I was looking good.
Anyway, cinematography in this film is just the first thing I think we can talk about. And it's really great. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
And this film overall has this warmth to it where I sat down and I was like 10, 15 minutes in and I was like, wow, I can really just like see why people like love this already. Just the way it looks and feels really kind of snuggly, even though it's not necessarily a happy movie, which I think has to do with the setting as well, because the first maybe 3/4 of the film is set in this place where they all live, which is very tight and narrow.
Well, a lot's in the hallway. Like I was just sort of reflecting,
Yeah.
like you don't really get a good idea of the layout of the actual
Exactly.
living bit because you just sort of see where they are relative to each other because they live next door in a building. But beyond that, you don't really understand the space per se. Like you just know how close they are relative to each other.
Another thing that's kind of worth noting from my experience is that I didn't pay attention to when it was made. So obviously it's set in the
60s.
early 60s. Yeah.
To the late 60s.
Yeah.
Sort of. Yeah.
But this came out in 2000 and I don't know. I haven't
wouldn't
made
have
that
known.
connection. You wouldn't have known. It feels older. It feels classic. You know what I mean?
So the cinematography is unreal, and I think it's just functioning on so many levels. It's famously like narratively functioning in the way that they are in close proximity, and the camera is doing a lot to portray that. There's a lot of frames within frames, which has been reported by every video essay you've ever seen on this film. but it's true. But what's sort of funny about this was I was watching that because I remembered that when I was watching this, because I haven't seen it in 4 years, but I remembered the essay talking about how there's frames within frames, and I was watching it looking for that, but I was also sort of like, I feel like they're shooting a real location, so there's not a heap you can do that looks good besides doing these long lenses to get a cinematic look in this corridor anyway. So I think they were sort of determined by their conditions, not to undermine how great the camera work
But
is.
there's also the point where you scout locations and you pick a hallway that looks the way it looks. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
But there was very few set pieces, right? Like
locations.
yeah, locations. Sorry. Yeah, very repetitive in terms of where they are.
Yeah, you've got the corridor, you've got his bedroom, you've got sort of her dining room / corridor in the in the apartment block, where she's cooking in the back of the frame or something's going on in the foreground.
You got her office,
Her office, his office.
his wife's office, but that's always from the outside as well.
Yeah.
You're always looking through a window.
Yeah. And that's sort of like a library or something, because you get a few things there when they're on phone calls. And then probably the biggest space is and obviously the noodle bar.
Yeah.
But then the wider space is probably the
alleyway?
The alleyway. So I guess the alleyway is the one where you go, okay, they're deliberately doing this because you're always getting the building near side, taking up a certain amount of space in the frame. The result is that they always seem closed in, and they always seem, I guess, observed, and just stuff's pressing in on them. They're never free and spacious. Considering that you could have captured some sort of shot where it's interesting. It shows a great restraint to not show them in the context of a city or something like that. That's a shot that wouldn't be wild here.
Yeah, it's funny because it's in Hong Kong, but you don't really see the city or anything that's definitively Hong Kong. You just kind of fill in the pieces based on the little bits you see around.
Yeah, I think maybe a small percentage of that is because you can control a historic look in, because 2000, as Nick said, they've done such a great job at making you think it's older than it is. But in 2000, Hong Kong looks nothing like this. You imagine that there's.
Well, you don't know.
But you imagine, maybe in certain parts, but you imagine that there's Panasonic and Sony and stuff like that in the billboards. So they did shoot it in real locations in older areas, but also in a bit of Shanghai, I believe. And then the hotel was shot in Bangkok, actually.
I think the one word you said there was the observer sort of thing. That's another one of those video essay opinions which I'd heard. You kind of feel like you're the third person watching in to all the interactions, especially some of them there's a little bit of curtain or something like that kind of obscures your view between where you are as the viewer and them in the scene.
Do we want to get the video essay opinions out of the way just so I'm aware what they are? Because
it's frame in frames, it's observer.
I actually have a video essay song that really gets a spin, so this will be good.
It's my video essay. I will explain what Parasite is a masterpiece. Really haven't got much to say, so I'll just pause unnecessarily mid-sentence.
So, what I really appreciate about this film is the camera movement, though. I think the camera movement, it really lends itself to the fact that everything else is restrained because it makes the camera movement feel like you're shattering a wall. It's very deliberate.
Mm-hmm.
For example, the one dramatic camera movement thing that we laughed at before, sort of, because we watched a clip where they finally have the discussion about having the cheat in, is you get this whip pan between him and her, and it's so different to everything you've seen so far. You've seen smooth tracks up and pans and tilts. You've seen smooth dollies and stuff, and then you get this little bit of chaos. And this is hugely contrasting to his other films because Chungking Express is wild. Wait till you see it. It's a lot of handheld sort of stuff and open shutter angles, so stuff's blurring together and this aesthetic. But this film is so restrained, so it really does stand out in his filmography. And then narratively, it functions narratively and holistically, it functions because this film really lulls you into this mood. And it's because I think it also helps that it's very stable and confident, but it's also sort of repetitive. the first like 30, 40 minutes of the film, not much happens. It's all about like seeing them pass by in the corridors, seeing these brief moments of interaction. And then it kind of cranks up the importance of when they do interact. What did you think watching the start of this?
Yeah, so I think what's interesting about the first half, obviously it's super repetitive, and the scenes are really short. Like they don't stay around. They only give you all the information you need, and then they move on to the next thing. So like you actually see like you miss out on a bit of character development that you might see in another film. Like another film, you can imagine them spending more time with both of the
in their individual lives.
Yeah, exactly.
To show that they are, I guess, building up to this premise of them breaking out a little bit.
Mm-hmm. And Mr. Chow, like you don't see much of him particularly. It's not really focused on him for the start.
Yeah, it does give her sort of more time at the office, and
which is interesting because then the film kind of towards the end feels maybe more like it's focusing on him a bit, you know? Like he's the one who falls in love with her, and
because he comes the more like the driving force in their romantic kind of story. Like he's the one that really drives it, I would say.
Because he remains a kind of mysterious figure for the start of the film until, I guess, that diner scene particularly, you know? There's glimpses of it, but yeah. Basically, what I was going back to at the start is just, it's edited in an interesting way.
Yeah.
Where it feels like this kind of importance and almost not importance, where you're only seeing these little interactions. And it's almost like how it would be if you met someone and how you were kind of getting to know someone. It's like, these are all the little times you've seen them before anything relevant happens. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which is a cool way of playing it, I think.
I think it's just heavily coded because you're seeing stuff and you're like, why am I seeing this?
Mm-hmm.
And so even in the clips that we watched to prepare for this, like, I just think that this film would look entirely different on a second watch. Mm-hmm. Like, because they're showing bits that are trying to build you up for the weight of what's going on. The only time you start catching something being astray is you're like, how come I haven't seen their partners yet? You know, you're not seeing Mr. Chan or Mrs. Chow. And like you get a bit of Mrs. Chow because she's like letting him down and being like, I'm working late. And then you hear that they've had a little bit of a fight, but you don't really understand what she does and what their relationship is. You have no reason to like them as a couple, which I think I think that this is sort of ends up being a film that's like, how could you justify people cheating? What does the ideal situation of people ending up cheating look like?
That's a good point, yeah.
I couldn't help but feel like that watching this film because, to be honest, I forgot that their partners were cheating. Did you remember this?
I guess yes, but no. Like it serves as the reason why they come together, but then it kind of becomes unimportant in that sense. Like it's not unimportant, but I guess, yeah, I did kind of forget.
So you forgot. Yeah, because I completely forgot. And then I just remember them cheating and being like, oh, I thought this film was a little bit more about two scumbags, you know? And I was like watching it going like, oh, how do they make us like these main characters?
Oh, you thought the main character was scumbags.
Not like as a fleeting memory, I knew that they cheated with each other. I didn't remember the circumstances.
I remembered that like they sort of had absent partners. So it was just like a thing that they were around and then kind of grew fond of each other from there.
But that's so interesting. Like that's the whole movie. Like how do you not remember that, you know?
I just remember like the glances. I just remember the reserved love. I thought that was the whole film.
Interesting if that doesn't happen. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, is it not if they're still cheating without a good reason to cheat?
But they're not cheating, really. They're emotionally cheating, right?
So I guess this is a question. Do you think they're not getting together?
I definitely don't, because they always talk about how they're like, oh,
we won't be like them.
We won't be like them. We won't be like them. We'll be better than them. And they go, we know, but they don't know. So I think that's pretty...
And you can see particularly with the rehearsing of confronting their partners, particularly for her, like how that's real like emotional support.
I hadn't thought about it. Like, I honestly read it as though they're cheating, but it's just too dignified to show it on screen.
Really? I don't know, but that would change how I feel about it. Like, I feel like there's so much... The fact that they're not cheating is part of the heartbreak, you know?
I think that's where the climax of the film is kind of the sad part, because it's them missing each other and you sort of see how their lives drift apart and they kind of have close encounters that don't really happen. It's kind of like the what could have been for both of them.
And all by this standard where they want to be better than them.
Well, like, thinking about it for more than 10 seconds, it's like definitely the way it's supposed to be made. But the film also works if you read it like they are.
You wrote an essay and you didn't even know how the movie
Yeah,
went?
I know.
Damn.
It was like 8,000 words. It was published. They're like, this kid's a prodigy. First year out of uni. What's he doing?
What are the journals that they publish film articles in?
There are...
No, what are they called though? I'm just curious. It's not Nature or,
they're like collation journals, and I think they're like film studies. Like they get a lot of them published at once is the point. Or you're actually allowed to cite magazines, like if they're like formal enough.
Empire's top 10 blockbusters of 2021.
No, there's like sound and image and stuff. Because it's the classic, like as long as it's got an editor. And so there are magazines that are film articles that have editors.
So you couldn't steal a Letterboxd review.
No, I couldn't.
But you could steal the idea, but technically not be allowed to cite it.
Yeah,
A future film student can't cite you in the podcast.
This gets edited.
I'm just putting it out there. Like
this is a peer-reviewed podcast, isn't it?
I mean, there's a big part I'm cut out already. And also, I think that you probably want me to cut out the part that you didn't understand this movie properly.
Yeah, that's pretty shameful. But I think that you editing this film will be a little bit like Wong Kar Wai in this film.
All right, we're going to start the joke again. Go.
So I think you editing this podcast might be a little bit like you editing.
Should I leave this in just to show
Okay, so I think you edited this podcast is a lot like how Wong Kar Wai edited this film. It took 15 months to shoot. Anyway, it's amazing this film is an hour 38, considering that they shot across 15 months. Hearing this production stories genuinely gives me trauma. Like I can't imagine anything worse than shooting a film without a script, but that's how Wong Kar Wai works.
Yeah, that's crazy. Tom and I have been planning a music video, and it's been quite funny because he wants everything planned out in tables and stuff like that. And if I come up with a concept that I describe to him in words, he goes, maybe, find a reference for me. So then I've got to scour the internet for an image that kind of looks like the frame I'm imagining in my head.
Yeah. It's challenging because if I've learned anything from the film process, and I think that a lot of people haven't learnt this from the film school process, it's you should intricately plan everything. Mm-hmm. My personality works that I should plan everything, and I do such a better job if I plan it. But then, there are other individuals who operate in a completely different way. And I don't know, like there's no right answer. It's only what you can do. But it's like, I feel like there's enough decisions I got to make on set without going, what's the story we're shooting again here?
Yeah, it's interesting though, because I haven't seen his other films, but this film is very contained, and that's like a big thing that we're talking about. There's a skeleton cast, probably a skeleton crew. This to me could be the film where you do that. Do you know what I mean?
It seems like such a tight film, and it seems like an indie success where they're like, we need 4 locations, we need 2 actors, we need 2 weeks of shooting. Like this honestly could be that, couldn't it? And I forgot this.
15 months is insane when you put it like
months.
that.
That meant they kept meeting up. And
for a lot of it just being 2 characters,
yeah,
like having conversations. That's a
But what was his idea? Did you find any of that or not?
Yeah, so this was originally part of a different film he was going to make, which was set in China, and it was going to be like, are they vignette stories or something like that?
Mm.
So that's what the other film's like. That's what Chungking and
Fallen Angels is definitely like that.
Fallen Angels is like, they're like bit stories of characters.
Mm-hmm.
And so this was one of them, and it was called something about food, and it was about these people who share noodles and secrets. And then he got shut down in China because they wanted to see his script, and the man does not work with a script, and he had
Same thing happened to me in Geelong.
He had unapproved scenes shot in Tiananmen Square and a bit of shenanigans, and so then he had to change it, and he adopted that story as the main story. And then he had a good relationship with the actors. Mr. Long is in a lot of his films. Yeah, so then they meant that they kept meeting up. They were like, isn't that just amazing?
When you say keep meeting up, what do you mean?
They had to keep
filming,
getting together months and weeks apart. The cinematographer pulled out, Chris Doyle. I think he's Australian.
He pulled out.
Yeah, so he got to near the end and then was like,
is he credited still? Because
they're equally credited. There's a second guy. And then
interesting.
Wong reckons it influenced his filmmaking because it meant he had to be more restrained, and
Right.
more plain and more.
For a movie that's complimented on cinematography, it's very interesting that a cinematographer quits midway through production.
Yeah, I don't think he quit like hatefully, but he's like, I got other stuff to do, man. Like, this is getting a bit long, Kar
Been
Wai.
15 months and we're still in this hallway. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
fascinating.
More production notes. The film was originally filmed in a completely different style. It was a lot more... Yeah, so a lot of it was improvised, and initially it was a bit saucier. There was them throwing witty dialogue at each other and engaging of several scenes of lovemaking. Then they realised it worked better as a reserved film. Pretty weird to imagine.
It's so interesting because you can't help but feel that the culture plays a big part in it as well. Like there's a lot of worry about obviously what people think and that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And so them having saucy scenes doesn't really make sense.
Does
It's just
imply that I was
interesting.
right initially, though, that they were making love. So maybe he just cut it out.
In
maybe
the unreleased edit,
yeah, maybe I
you
have
saw a different version.
yeah some.
How long's the director's cut of this? Like 6 hours?
What happens? They go to the Noodles like 3 more times. They get different takeaway one night.
But it's so funny. Like you can almost imagine this film like, you know, he has 15 months of footage and he's like, all of it's shit except for this. And like the stuff that he keeps is like understated. Do you know what I mean? Like that's just a really funny
Yeah, it's amazing.
thought.
15 months. It's just like I wanted to watch this over Rosemary's Baby last night because Rosemary's Baby went for 2 hours and 10, 15 minutes. This film went for 1 hour 40, and I imagine this was shot in probably 14 more months than Rosemary's Baby. Like that was his Polanski student film, I'm pretty sure.
Really? Oh,
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah, just unreal. I couldn't do it. I respect you, Wong. Not my.
So you've
style.
got to give, I don't know, it's funny. It does feel like Apocalypse Now in a sort of way, in that
Yeah.
it's like,
It's the Honkanese Apocalypse Now.
yeah, but the fact that, you know, people never pull it off. So this is like maybe one of 2 or 3 times where someone's pulled it off where things have gone that haywire or whatever. It's funny having, like, knowing that now and looking at, like I was talking about before, like the kind of fragmented nature of the first half. Like
Makes
you
a
could,
little more sense, maybe.
well, it's weird. Yeah. Yes and no, because I was watching it and I was like, oh, this is interesting. It's not like jarring per se, but it's definitely different from what you're traditionally used to, where you don't let scenes play out. You don't develop the characters very much. And you're just like, okay, this is a 10-second clip where they say hello and that's it. And then we're moving on to the next scene.
And it ends with these little like fade to blacks and fade out of. But yeah, so it seems like he found the movie in the edit, right? So
And beyond that, there's like, what, 3 songs in this film as well, you know? It's
So we've
so
got the-
weird. It's like, how do you accidentally fumble upon all these specific things? Like, that blows my mind.
was it a matter of diving through the edit and being like, oh, this take's better. Like, look at the glance he does there. And like the take that's laying on the floor next to it is like her going, oh, looking good, man. Like it's this expressive version of it. And then he's like, maybe just try like this, or just like humor me. And then he turned out with a gem. Obviously, I doubt it, but it's just unreal.
I wonder when everything was filmed, especially because it was over a couple of countries, like relative to each other in that 15-month period.
Yeah. Well, they had to get new investors, as I said in the intro. Like,
But how much does it cost to film in a hallway as well?
it was shot in film though, so isn't like this like long.
Imagine
style
wasting
filmmaking.
15 months. Oh, I don't know. This man, he's
Well, that's what
Crazy.
So that was the other thing Chris Doyle did say. He was like, I was sick of like refilming. Like they would go back and shoot stuff again, and that sounds like me. Honestly, it's like, no, we should have got it the first time we were there. Anyway,
basically he's an idol of yours that you will never work with.
Wong. Especially now after Blind But Very Nights. Let's see what he does this time. But he has made a film since.
Yeah, he made the sequel to this, didn't he?
It's a spiritual sequel.
So it's called 2046, if I'm not mistaken, and the hotel room number was 2046.
Yeah.
I did pick up on that. But 2046 is a reference to the year in the sequel, is what you told me.
It's not the sequel. It's a spiritual
Sequel.
And there's a spiritual prequel as well.
Just like this pod is a spiritual sequel to...
Soylent Green. What were you going to go with?
God, if I was wittier, I would have had a good joke then. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Phased out at 10.
Jack and Tom couch talk.
Oh, yeah.
Amazing.
Okay, before we get to... We're very much deep into the how, what, why, but I want to know, like...
Yeah, plot, themes.
And feelings. I don't know. Like, tell me about it, Ben. Like, where are you? with this film?
I think it's just like a really enjoyable movie. Like the cinematography particularly really stands out to me. But I just think like there's a lot going on in not necessarily a lot of dialogue. Like there's a lot of in their body language, and particularly like you said with the camera, like in the diner scene when it kind of whips between the two of them, that's really like liberating in terms of their relationship, because particularly with their respective spouses who are obviously cheating, the conversations, like you don't even see the other partner, like you don't see their partner's face the whole time.
Yeah.
And then a lot of them, like there's a doorway between them. So like they're not even in the same room. Like there's a physical barrier between them. Like there just seems like a lot of distance. And so to see the two characters together and sort of connected through the camera really kind of creates that connection.
I could not but feel watching this that we were all really mesmerized. We watched this with Dad, and it was just like silent, and we're all just watching it, and then no one said anything.
It's so warm, is what I got to say. And like,
well, the colors just pop as well, right? Like her outfits are just
let's go
on bloody point.
Okay,
I do have trivia about.
We'll give him some credit in that he's a pretty fly looking dude. He's pretty handsome.
He's very handsome.
He looks good.
But
she looks amazing.
Yeah, she is the reason you watch this film. So apparently, according to Wong himself, they had 20 to 25 dresses for her because they cut the film so short, a byproduct of the editing process. He said it feels like a fashion show because she changes all the time. But then it was intended to be like a repetitious sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with the music, the angle, the clock, the corridor, the staircase. But yeah, her fashion just really shines through. And I think the dress really matches the mood. Like this idea of like a collar that's sort of prohibitive.
Yeah.
And there's very much a thing going on with her perfect posture.
Yeah.
And her high shoes and just the way that she presents herself.
Yeah, it's almost like she's enclosed, but like the same way the cinematography in the setting feels like they're kind of boxed in. The way that she dressed, and I guess the role that she's forced to play as the wife, whether it's, time-wise, culturally, or whatever is expected of her as the wife, it does feel like she's trapped as well through that.
And the lady she rents off, like, comments on her dressing a couple of times, where she's like, dressed up like that just to go get noodles.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
that sort of thing.
Well,
and it adds to the kind of heartbreak, right? That she feels like this is expected of her anyway.
Well, it's interesting because I think it functions as, she's putting on a face and stuff, but it's also a huge part of her dignity as well, right? Like she's going like, F you husband, I'm going to look amazing sort of thing. I think another comment that is really powerful in an understated way is his mate Ping being like, oh, if your wife wasn't so beautiful, she'd be afraid of what she looks like. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a killer line in this film where you don't see, like, it functions so well when you don't see Mr. Chow's wife. Mm-hmm. Because you spend the whole time going like, oh, like, would she be an upgrade, downgrade? And like, it sounds petty, but immature, but like that stuff exists. And I think the film, by not showing them, is kind of going like, it doesn't matter. You know what I mean? Like, it's deeper than that.
Well,
it's more about connection than just looks.
The whole not seeing their faces thing is something you pick up on pretty
what
quickly.
do you think about it? Because I think it's sort of like explicit filmmaking. And it's very much a device. Basically, just like comment, what do you think it means?
I think that you don't really have an attachment to them in their actual married couples as a couple. Like, you don't really have a face to the other partner. It's just like a name. And then even when you know they're cheating with each other, you don't have any emotional connection to the respective husband and wife because you've never seen them. They're just kind of like something that's there.
Yeah, well, I think it functions simply in a dehumanizing way, just to be like, you can't feel sorry for people that you never see the face of. So that was what promoted my theme, that I decided myself that this was a film about saying what would be the ideal of two people cheating. But I think that it also functions in a way that sort of makes them seem a little bit more grotesque, like these people for cheating. Like, it's a lot more... Well, it's basically like tabloidy to be like, oh, look at these horrible people. And then you look at her hair and you're like, what a stupid haircut. Only a cheater would have a cute little bob like that. What are you doing? You know what I mean? And then, like, because I guess you're so desperately looking for anything to pick up on. So you're seeing these people in silhouette and you're just like, you're just the worst.
It tricked me in how you've already at this point seen them rehearse interactions a couple of times, but when they're in the hotel eating and you see the back of him and she's like, "Are you cheating on me? Don't lie to me."
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, what's going down? But then like when
Which
the
is
camera turns.
a smart scene.
Such a cool scene.
Yeah.
But beyond just not seeing their face, you also don't hear them emote, and they're speaking monotone pretty much the whole time.
partners.
The partners. So like, you're
Do you
right.
even hear Mr. Chan?
Yeah, you do. They have some interactions,
Oh, at the door.
but it's all
mostly
just
and
like
stuff.
one note.
And he's really quiet. Did you notice that? Like, Chow was like, "Oh, I got some books for your wife." And he's like, "Oh, thank you for the rice cooker." Yeah, actually, that scene means so much more now. I didn't realize that at the time. Like,
Oh, he's like, your wife paid for it.
yeah, of course she paid for it. How'd she pay? But, yeah.
Oh,
please.
here's the one meme that jumped out at me is the rice cooker thing when they're all celebrating the rice cooker. And I got to say, as when I had to start cooking for making food for myself, that is the exact same experience.
I had the same.
And my rice
yeah.
cooker broke during the lockdown, and I picked
So
one up from the
he goes-
corner
he-
downstairs.
He calls me. He says, "Tom, next time you're in Japan, do you reckon you can scoop me one of them rice cookers?" And I
Please
said,
don't sleep with my life.
I'll
Yeah.
pay you in money.
"Yeah,
Only money.
how good are the cows? They are called the Cow family.
Isn't it Koo?
Yeah, the Coos. Sorry.
Yeah, the Koos and Mrs. Suen.
Okay. Yes. How good are they? How good is it? How relatable is it? Actually, Ben and I had very close relationship to the moment where she goes, where they're trapped in the bedroom, and he goes, "Oh, how long do you think you'll be?" And she goes, "Just 8 rounds." And that is absolutely Ben and I. That is any card game we've played.
Oh,
It's just like, "Oh, we'll get back to homework. Oh, we'll go to bed soon. It's just 8 more rounds of."
I thought you were going to say like that happened to you when you were staying in a hostel or something like that.
Oh, no.
Do you remember when we were in Kyoto and we were in this hostel that was kind of nice, but there was only for some reason like us staying in the room, and the people who owned the hostel were like up all night, like having a party sort of thing. Do you remember
Yeah.
that? I
And
think
someone
it's like those
stumbled in
vibes.
pretty late as well.
Drunk into our room or something.
Yeah, and there were just 3 of us in like 8-bedroom bunk beds.
It was
just
bigger than that.
really
It was
wide.
huge.
You know what I distinctly remember reading in that hotel? Kevin Spacey getting cancelled.
I remember everyone was getting cancelled while we were in Japan. We're like, thank God we're out of the country for this clusterfuck.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yes. So gossip itself functions pretty strongly in this film. No, I do think that.
What a
I think
segue.
that.
You're on fine form tonight.
Yeah, I'm doing my best. I'm putting in a 40-point game on 17 of 20 shooting. Sorry, too much Bill Simmons recently, but yeah, I think that the neighbors function really well as characters. Because they're pretty much the only characters. Okay, so let's break down the characters. How about we do that? So you've got Mr. Chow, Mrs. Chan. We've got their partners, of course.
Yeah, Mr.
And
Ping.
We got, Ping, kind of a very weird operator. Not quite sure
What's
why
the
you.
function?
Questionable financial decisions.
Why would you visit Mr. Ping? Why would you follow Mr. Ping to Singapore when the dude can't even pay for his tab on the brothel?
Because he's heartbroken.
That he's losing Mr. Ping. Mr. Ping. Actually, that was the meme I wanted to take from this film the most. I wanted to take the fade-in way of talking.
Yeah.
Because I think it's such a good
Which
time.
is so funny because this is what I wanted to say before when Ben was talking about how there's subtle dialogue.
Mhm.
This is a film that makes me wish I spoke. You know when you watch like
What
subtitled
language would
films?
you like to speak?
I've edited out a chunk where I googled what language they speak in this. I'll just be clear about
But
that.
like, to be fair, it was actually somewhat challenging.
Yeah, they speak. So apparently in this film they speak Shanghainese and Cantonese.
Yes.
So my point was, Ben said there's lots of subtle dialogue in this, and when you watch a film that's subtitled, sometimes you just read the subtitles and it's good enough for you, and other times you read it and you go, I really wish that I spoke the language because it seems so much more delicate and subtle than what you're actually getting communicated to you by
Yeah.
the subtitles.
Yeah.
Because I did notice the subtitles in this are quite plain and simple. And like even when you've got that part where there's a transition at the end and it comes up with like he saw his past as a dusty
Oh,
window.
my God. I can quote that for you. Well, I can quote it with a little bit of reference. He remembers those vanished years, as though looking through a dusty window pane. The past is something he could see, but not touch. And everything he sees is blurred and indistinct. So I can just
It's a pin.
drop it in,
Yeah.
incorporate it. But how good is that quote? I feel like that, like, you know how sometimes you read or like absorb a famous quote in like context of your favorite book or something like that, and it really hits. That quote really hit for me. Memories as though looking through a dusted and faded glass is like, that's brilliant, don't you think? Isn't that what? That's what my memory of this film was. I saw I don't know, dusty window, and I saw two people cheating on each other, having sex all the time, apparently, and no, turns out they weren't.
Anyway, my point was, I feel like you'd pick up a lot more speaking the languages that they speak in this film.
That's a good point. I wonder, because if it's a language where there's like different formality and all that sort of stuff, because particularly the early interactions, it's like, oh, I won't bother you, I'll be going then.
Yeah,
it's like how they sort of
exactly.
sign off.
It seems super blunt, right?
Yeah,
and it's interesting because particularly I just said how the partners speak in these monotones and they don't really give much emotion. But you do wonder, like, I'm sure that the formality is like all there, you know?
Yeah.
And not being from a culture so hung up on formality, you probably do miss a lot of the subtleties of this film generally, because the two leads in this are trying not to be judged. They're trying to avoid the gossip. They don't want to be as bad as them. They don't want to be part of a scandal. But when you think about it, the scandal that's taking place is between...
It's not even their scandal.
Well, who's noting the scandal? It's these people that they live with who they didn't know before. Like, it's not like, oh, my parents are going to know that I'm cheating on my husband, or, you know, my dad's boss is going to know that I'm cheating on my husband. It's like, this is entirely contained in their social circle with who they live with. Do you know what I mean? Which obviously goes a long way to say about the cultural things and about... which I think is really interesting.
It's quite interesting you don't see her parents as well. She references her mother a few times, because that is where the societal pressure would come in. But essentially, you kind of get this vibe that you're like, they couldn't divorce each other. Like, it's not in their interest to divorce their partners. It'd be too much... It's just like rebooting in like a classic way that you'd have to like start your life all over again. But like it really captures, and I think it's timeless and cultureless, ascended specific cultures, that with breaking up with a cheater is really hard because it embarrasses you. Mm-hmm. And I think this film really captures like the shame of being cheated on.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah.
And it's funny because that's what you're saying. And I mean, the irony is that you thought they were cheating on each other and you were like, the film was about creating the perfect scenario for like when you could cheat on someone.
I still think that is functioning though. I think you could, not saying Wong did this, like maybe one of the months he was inspired by this idea to be like, let's set up the perfect cheating scenario.
But if he's going, this is the perfect cheating scenario, and then you are still held back by societal pressures of shame, of all these other things, that makes it so much more powerful.
Yeah.
And like, I didn't articulate that in my head the way that you said it, but having said that, I think that is what's going on, you know? And that's what makes it more heartbreaking, and you know,
especially for Mrs. Chan, like, because her boss as well is cheating, and she's sort of like complicit in that because she's on the phone and she's like, oh, he's going to be in the office late. Meanwhile, he's going to a dinner with his, affair partner.
Yeah, that's an important point that I was going to do when I did my disjointed cast list. He's a very functional character, as opposed to Chow's office, where the other people don't really matter. They're just sort of around. But yeah, her boss, it's a pretty big deal emotionally when you find out that he's cheating. And it all comes across with the tie thing, right? It's about him wearing this tie and he's going, oh, it's a bit flashy, I won't wear it. And then the scene plays a little too long that you know that he got the tie from his mistress, right? And then that comes back later when the thing that gives away...
And what did she say to him? She says, someone who's paying attention would notice.
Yes.
Something like that.
Killer line. Like in the mood, it's a killer line.
Yeah.
But yeah, so he works as sort of like another contrast point of, I imagine, shame as well, because she doesn't want to be involved with that. Like, she's dignified enough to avoid it for her boss.
Exactly. And that's what's so interesting is like there's this logic that people have in these scenarios where it's like, I'm far enough removed from it. I'm going to keep myself out of it. I'm going to stay out of it. And it almost leads to her being complicit in her own husband cheating on her, in that she's kind of like, I'm going to stay removed from it.
Yeah, you're promoting this culture as well, sort of.
So it sounds like I'm blaming her but I'm obviously not trying to say that at all. I'm trying to say that it definitely affects the decisions she's making, I think.
Yeah.
And the way that they both go about it, you know?
Yeah, for sure. Especially with these rehearsal scenes, I actually get the feeling that they actually don't want to confront their partners, right?
Well, she, in one or more of them, sort of breaks down crying. Like, even the practicing is too intense.
But then, okay, hear me out. This film is sort of implying that they don't really actually need... Like, they're basically... they're cheating emotionally, inspired by these other people. They're spending time together as this couple that can't ever really be together. But then the film's sort of implying they're actually a better fit than their own partners are.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's this interesting thing going like... Because you kind of want them to break up and get together or something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then that can't happen. And the film's better for it, of course. But they are cheating on their partners by emotionally spending time together and getting their fulfillment that you need. Like the actual love stuff they're getting from these people who aren't their partners, right? And it's just fascinating to, I don't know, I guess imagine, like think about what they're doing from a bad light, because the film basically positions you to think about them in a positive light and be like, hey, they're victims, they're just making the best of a bad situation. But you can look at this film from another angle, which is a bit more like, should they have taken action at some stage? Are they letting down themselves, but are they also letting down their partners by never actually confronting them for these issues? Because you can't actually save a relationship by not talking about the issue, right?
Right.
So, this exercise in rehearsing what they would say to their partner is almost like going, I don't want to handle this. It's not my problem, in a kind of messed up sort of way. What do you think?
How so? Just that last bit.
I just mean she's getting all of the resolution in such a safe space by running it through with Mr. Chow. And she never actually has to face any of the consequences of doing the breakup thing. Doing the confrontation thing. Of course, you could guess that maybe they do it off screen, that they have the showdown, but I think the film's somewhat implying that they wouldn't have confronted each other about it, right?
It's hard to say because the ending of it's quite ambiguous, I think.
Mm.
You don't really know. I mean, Mr. Chow moves away.
Goes to Singapore.
Well, it crosses a 5-year period.
Which makes you think that he is not with Mrs. Chow anymore.
I think they broke up, but it's not... Oh, actually, no. She's
might
single.
Have.
Yeah.
Because she moves in.
Yeah.
And they say a mother and her son lives there. Yeah. So...
Pretty cool little kicker.
Yeah, and so then the whole thing is they missed out, they were doing all this for nothing. They held back for no reason. They didn't follow their hearts for shame and all these other kind of petty reasons when they should have, for an inevitable outcome. Well, not necessarily miserable.
The few scenes where it nearly happens, but it doesn't. She goes to Singapore and, tries to call him and all that sort of stuff, but doesn't go through with it. It's just...
Yeah, she gets him on the line, hey?
Yeah.
Sorry, I just had a thought that was relevant. When we were talking about the boss as well, there's also this thing that I don't know if you guys picked up or interpreted it the same way, where you made a good point where when this film holds on something, it means that it means something, right? Because particularly the first half of the film, I was talking before about how it jumps, it gives you 10 seconds and 2 lines of dialogue and it moves on to the next thing. When Chow calls the office and he goes, "Oh, Mr. Chow called for you," and she goes, "Oh, okay." And then there's the boss is looking at her for 5 seconds or something like that.
She doesn't call him back. I think to me that implication is that someone called you and you're not calling them back immediately. She didn't care enough to.
Interesting. I interpret, to me that was what do you him judging her.
No, I think he is judging her. But I think the way he's judging her is why are you getting a call from someone who you're not going to call back immediately? And it's who is this Mr.
Yeah,
Chow?
okay, gotcha. Yeah.
I think he's starting to suspect she is cheating.
Yeah.
It's the implication for me.
So I think there is a lot of subtle gender stuff going on here as well, obviously.
I was going to raise that with, it's Mrs. Suen, who's the landlord.
Yeah.
Mrs. Chan, she kind of cops the bad implications either way. When her husband's not there, it's kind of
exactly.
Why are you going out so often?
Well, no, at the start it's she's always alone, it's sad, a couple should be together, all that sort of stuff. And then when she starts spending more time with Mr. Chow, it's why you're out so much, that sort of thing. She doesn't win either way.
Yeah,
so she kind of gets the bad press of it, no matter what she does, whilst her husband is off doing his own thing.
Yeah, and so, when they have that final scene, or not final scene, but that scene in the rain, and he says that he loves her, and she says, "I didn't think you'd fall in love with me." Surely some of that has got to be that him being a man is the only one who could. He's the only one who has the luxury of being able to fall in love with her. Like, to her, it doesn't cross her mind is never a real option anyway. Do you know?
Yeah, that's
because she couldn't be like, "I love you too, let's run away." Because like, imagine that. How bad is that for her? But like him, a man's allowed to fall in love with somebody else. You know what I mean? Out of passion.
Yeah.
And I mean, this is just, I guess, generally praising the subtleties of this film. Obviously, right? This is stuff that you kind of think about in the back of your head, and then you talk about it, and you're like, "Oh yeah, this is the thing." I wasn't just like, it's lots of coding, I guess, is the film school term, right?
Well, yeah, coding. Yes, it is coding. I'll give you that.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'll play
1 point.
Play it down the line. That's one of these ones. Well done. So when you were talking about the confrontation scene where she's getting lectured for going out too much, that's shot in such like a. It almost feels obvious to me, but it's obviously it's definitely not obvious. So many people wouldn't have done it. It's focused on her,
Yeah.
and you're only getting the back of her neck, which is quite a fascinating filmic choice because I guess the way you do that in a more mainstream way is to capture over the shoulder of the lady who's lecturing and just stay on the frame of Mrs. Chan's reactions. But then instead they literally just show the back of her neck and show the lady speaking out of focus. I think that sort of stuff is like, it works so much in this film, and the same thing with not showing their partners' faces because they commit to it so often. And the slow, gradual things work because it happens again and again, and it doesn't feel tacky or like a throw-in thing. God, I'm dying.
This happens every episode.
You can't carbonate me before I'm going on a rant. Anyway, I just want to praise the cinematography again. The thing that I think I captured most from this film, because I was watching it for lighting, right? Just because, now that Nick's a gaffer.
Shut up, you do this like 7 times in the episode. We get it, you go to films.
Okay. I've been looking for lighting, but then I think what Wong's films do so well is I think he has a great sense of movement. And even in this film, you still get it. Like, the controlled dollies are so good. You think of that scene where Mr. Chow and Mrs. Chan are spending time together, and you get that dolly shot from the mirror, and you're seeing their different faces and their reflections, and it's coming back. And then, of course, like the dining table where they dolly from behind him for some reason. And then even like the slow-mo stuff where they're going up and down the stairs. I think it's more pan and tilty, but just because it's slow-mo, it's really pronounced what the camera's doing. But I think that this film makes it, like, it reminds you of the fun stuff of cinematography, which to me is like the camera movement.
This is why we're here.
Yeah. Camera movement's my favorite part of cinematography. Like, when you get a good movement and it just like gets you in a mood, sort of. Like, I don't know how it functions. It just looks crisp, and it sort of means something that you don't cut, Like, the same thing with her and him passing on the stairs. The fact that they don't shoot. Let's imagine the Jason Bourne edit in where it's like her coming up the stairs and you get her angle of him and
1
then
second
his
cuts.
angle of her, and you get these rapid things. But because it's drawn out, it's going, well, it's like doing that thing where you stay on something and it's going, think about this a little longer, but it's the more entertaining version of that. It's like, think about this. Did you notice how they passed in the corridor? We're staying with him. No, actually, like, what about the noodles? What does it mean that we didn't follow her, I just think that there's so much to do in movement, and this film just gives you a lot.
This film in general, like, it presents itself like, hey, pay attention to everything, and everything is deliberate.
Yeah. So how do you do that? How do I adopt that into my filmmaking, which is shit, relatively?
All right. So you need 15 months.
Yeah. Clear your schedule.
Yeah, good.
I think something that this film does, it starts small and concise, right? I think that's got to be something where, like, you're 5 or 10 minutes in and you're like, okay, we're still in this scene. What am I looking for? It's like really, and then the other thing I would say is the editing that's very short and sharp. I think two things which kind of set you up for the mood, get you in the frame of mind.
Get in the mood for love.
In the frame of mind to be paying attention to everything. And it's it's pretty clear straight on that they're not going to show you the faces as well, you know. So I think you're giving away, you're doing a deliberate stylistic choice, which is extremely noticeable because as a cinema goer, you go, hey, they're not showing me the face of the person they're supposed to be showing me the face of. So like straight away, you're like, okay, what's going on here? I'm looking for more.
Yeah, and the faces not being there, which we've talked about a bunch, but what it means to the average viewer is like what does it mean that I'm not seeing their faces? It's asking the question in sort of like a foreshadowing sort of way. You start to realize something's up, basically.
But it's just so interesting. Like the cinematography in the first half is, like we've said, tight, concise, and good, but not as amazing as later on in the film when they get together. Because like when it goes later on, it just gets like flat out beautiful, and it's got those like you said, the dolly shot in the mirror and stuff like that.
Well, I'm
Do
sure.
you think that kind of runs in parallel with how that relationship?
Probably,
Yes,
yeah.
I think that's the thing we're talking into.
Because if you watch if you look at cinematography, dialogue, and like actual relationship within the story, it's like really strict and tight, and then it kind of becomes more free flowing.
But it's interesting. What I think is the testament to the filmmaking is that it's not boring or jarring for the start. Like it really,
And
it
I think
picks
the-
up, but it doesn't pick up in a way where you're like, thank God it's picked up. You're like, oh, it's picking up, you know?
Yeah, so I think that we just talked ourselves into that idea that he would know, which is that when they're together, the camera moves. When they're together, they're truly themselves. They're more free and stuff like that.
And obviously red's like a big theme, and I could be mistaken, but it feels like that comes out obviously when they're together more.
Yes. Well, the only thing that I remember is just her in that amazing dress that's like the flowers. And I was like, is this a good looking dress? Like, would this look tacky on anyone else? Is it just because she's beautiful? Or
Yeah.
I couldn't come with the answer. And like the color grading on this film, and this isn't even the era of color grading, although I was going to mention this.
Although
His finger is in the air. He's got
I'm wiggling my fingers. Oh Brother, We're Out There was released in 2000, which was the first film to be digitally graded. So this was beginning at the era of where film was trending towards phasing out. This was the beginning of the bell curve, or whatever you'd say, of the early adoption.
right. Okay, so just to be clear for our listeners, you're talking about something being shot on film versus something being shot digitally and then made to look the way it looks in post-production color grading.
No. So it's called a digital intermediate. And it was really hard researching this when I was first learning about it, because it's like, I want it to mean this. And then you just be like, no, this isn't what it means. And you're like, why doesn't, like, essentially what I thought it meant it didn't mean. So then I kept trying to like fit it into my keyword searches, but it didn't.
That's you with like half of your like vocabulary.
Yeah. I've
it's trial by error.
re-listening to the old podcasts, like whenever I listen to them back before we publish them, it's just like, didn't use that right.
Well,
Didn't use that
I
right.
just was looking over my cover letter I just submitted, and I said I have an acute interest, which obviously acute means like immense or whatever, but apparently it's got strong negative connotations. So I was like, oh.
I thought it would mean focused or something, right?
Anyway, allegedly, we'll see.
Where was
Digital.
Yes, so digital intermediate, essentially what it means is that they scanned the film and then graded it on a computer. It doesn't actually mean it had to be filmed on digital. It just means that the software to adjust the colors was digital. So alternatively, they had a thing, before color grading, you didn't actually have color grading, it was called color timing. And it was when you would adjust the colors, but you're obviously doing it in a physical way, and you're also doing it like developing a negative or something. And you were doing it in a way that was more about tints. They were doing things like adjusting the magenta versus the green and the warmth and the cold and that sort of thing, blue and yellows.
Like Instagram filters when you make your own.
Yeah. Well, because like the first two things you see on the digital software for color grade, like even photos and stuff like that, you get color temperature and green and pink tint. So that's like what color timing is. So then essentially what it meant to me is that this film, like, it doesn't, I think you can do a certain amount in post color timing, but it also meant that the sets themselves were really well, like the production design was really good. Like you've got colors that are pop in and you've got contrast coming in. So what sort of amazed me about this film was I was expecting the cinematography to be really, the lighting to be really soft and something like that. But the light's actually sort of harsh. Like you get quite a few shadows and stuff. So the explanation I can come up with is that the key lights are just because they were probably like film lights, so they were Fresnels. I'm actually not sure how to say it. They're like spotlights, and then they would diffuse. But then they use like the room lights, like lampshades and stuff like that. And then by contrast, they're a lot dimmer than the actual key lights that they were using on faces. But yeah, I was actually amazed that the lighting wasn't as like delicate as I was expecting it to be. So it speaks to, I think it speaks to two things. It speaks to just one, how film has a really good look. Like film, I don't know, it just captures color graduations really beautifully, which means that skin tones show up really well. And secondly, I think that the lenses they were using were really nice. So the key one with lenses is accuracy. So a lot of modern lenses, there's sort of an issue thing where they can replicate the image too perfectly. So people don't like them because their faces, you can see every pimple, every bump, all that sort of stuff. Whereas there's this vintage look in older lenses that weren't by design flawed, but in reality were. So like there's different things.
That's
like
a classic thing with all technology.
they're
Like,
softened. It's
when
like
you think about
yeah.
it, and film didn't exist before a certain time, or recorded music didn't exist
I was
before
going
a
to say, same
certain
with
time.
music, right? Like
It's just the way that
imperfections.
like you're used to 60 years of things being done a certain way that you can't go away from that anymore.
It's like that aesthetic that Under the Silver Lake was parodying, which is that you put key lights on people's faces and they just look really good. But then nowadays, when I point my DSLR at your face, you look freaking weird. And it's not because of you. It's not because of my light. It's because of my lens.
Are you talking about me specifically? Or is this
Specifically, yeah.
Ugh.
When I first got the DSLR pointing at your face.
I was probably a lot pimplier back then. Having said that, I'm
Weren't we
sweating
all?
in this hot box room we're in.
Well, it's just so many takes.
It's 35
So many
degrees
takes.
and I've got nothing under the Christmas tree.
Well, look, we're talking about the classics of cinema. Let's talk about the classics of music. In the Mood for Love.
All right, so thanks for your speech. I'm sure that was very
Good?
A question while you're still on the
Yeah, please.
the uni lecturer.
Yep, you with the blue t-shirt.
So
You in the carp shirt.
Me again.
with the slow motion, doing that on film, like the slow motion looks kind of janky in a way because I guess this is my little bit of like Corridor Crew YouTube knowledge coming through.
Yeah.
But it's like if they film it at whatever rate the film camera does and then slow it down, it's kind of a bit jerky. Like
It's half as many frames, right?
yeah.
Yeah. So is that?
Well, I guess
Is that a question?
Oh, you didn't know that? No, sorry. Keep going.
yeah, I guess just any thoughts on that.
Yeah. So I remember this was a classic Wong technique. Wong loves a bit of slow motion, draw out the mood, but also to sort of make you reflect a little bit. So the sequences on the stairs, they're definitely captured at double frame rate. So double frame rate in these days was a lot different because obviously it was a lot more expensive and riskier. It meant you were shooting stuff twice as fast, which meant
That's
you were
so
exposing
interesting.
twice as much
So
film.
like the film is literally moving twice as fast through the camera.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
So do you want me to keep dropping film
Sure.
trivia? So there's a thing, and I will finish this, but it's just interesting. So when they
Did this, they obviously mechanically.
Okay, can you
Is
do
there a
it?
TLDR?
Yeah, because I'm just going to say, look, that's a long spiel to leave in the pod. So can you give a very quick summarized version
well, the way
for the listeners at
Okay,
home? That's
so-
simple.
when you shoot, so the way that the 2 times frame rate works in the Mood for Love, it works in 2 ways. One of them is double frame rate, which is where you actually shoot in twice as much footage, and it's processing through the camera twice as fast. So then when you play it back at a regular frame rate, it is 1 frame. It is still the same ratio. It's still 1/25th of a second.
At half the speed, you still have the same number of frames in a second.
Exactly. But you're using twice as much film, which was a big deal, right? He also uses the other type of slow motion, which is still shooting the original 25 per second and then doubling each frame and showing it twice.
Right.
Ah,
Yeah. So when it looks janky and disjointed, it's
That's
because
the latter version.
he wasn't planned for it, or it's a stylistic choice, which I think it is a style. He does enough that it's probably a stylistic choice that he's doubling the frames, not the frame rate. He's showing you the same frame twice. That's why when you see the rain on the floor, I remember that one standing out. And some of the more random movements, like
There was one in particular where he was like smoking, and like the way the smoke was moving looked kind of.
Oh, that was one of the, I don't know if we're talking about the same scene, but that scene where he's smoking and they're like shooting the light and the smoke's coming up hitting the light in his office. That's one of the peak cinematography scenes in this film, I would say.
it just sucks because smoking is very aesthetic on camera. Like it catches light, you know. This is a film that makes you long for the ignorance of smoking.
We have Ben on the show, and Ben watches pretty much every movie we watch and doesn't come on the show. So I just want to be like, I want to ask, why did you want to come on this show? And give us, you know, your take.
I think firstly I was long overdue for my second appearance. After your extensive fan base requested me back on.
Well, I mean, look, Tenet is definitely one of our more popular episodes.
Is it?
Honestly, it's because like I remember watching these movies with Tom years ago, and I just remember them being really good movies and like really interesting movies.
So what do you think connects them to you? Like, what's the
Yeah,
personal
I was gonna
connection
say that.
you feel to this film?
I like it because a lot of the stuff we discussed about the cinematography, I really like. Like, I think that that's something as a movie watcher, as I've got older and wiser, like I appreciate more. Like these things where they're, you know, relatively simple plots, relatively simple settings, but like there's just there's a lot of storytelling in that setting. I think it's really cool.
The other film but the last Podron was a Christopher Nolan film. So are we getting conflicting opinions here? Are you lying? Were you lying on one of the pods?
Lying in what sense?
Well, I mean, look, you're saying you like small set, simple plots, and then
Okay, I'm allowed to appreciate
Yeah, I
both
think
ends of the
that-
spectrum.
dimensions.
I would say this is an important film, and it's a very accessible film as like
I think
it's creating your spectrum. This is like, in contrast to Nolan, it's almost a good point to bring up, almost. But this is minimalist
asking Ben a
filmmaking,
question.
minimalist filmmaking versus maximalist filmmaking, right? That's a film that like made freaking everything happen. This is a film that's deliberately doing the opposite. So it almost works that Ben's on for the film that's completely the opposite.
Yeah, and it's very different. Like I think that we in the Tenet touched on this a little bit about what movies get made and what movies people sort of talk about and stuff these days. Like this isn't a movie that it feels like would be as big now. I mean, I don't know how big it was in 2000, but it's just kind of like very different to what you see coming out.
Can I
nowadays.
just say culturally, like film culturally, it is interesting to me that this film is like a big film school film, as you went in your speech at the start about why you watched it, and there's a million video essays about it and all that sort of stuff. And having said that, I can't leave it. I didn't leave it knowing what everyone gets from this movie, you know,
I think it's
which I think is interesting because some films we watch and I go, this is great because of this, or this is great because of this. But this one's a bit of a mystery to me.
If you were a teacher, you wouldn't say, watch this movie for this technique or for this.
Well, look,
I think
you
you
can say
would. You'd do your lesson plan and you'd tie it into something. But
okay, but I'm saying you could go, this movie is great because of the cinematography, or watch this for the use of the color red as a motif, or listen to like the simple use of the way that they use music in this film, for example.
great use.
Or even just like the story. Or, like it's just interesting. There's a lot here that I don't think there's nothing that's particularly stands out as the best part of this film over another part of this film. I don't know if you necessarily agree with that. I think that there's a lot of different things for people to latch onto that think that, and you know, it's like Ben said about how it's a more subtle film and it's restrained. It does leave a lot of space for the person to maybe put themselves in it or to take different things from it, you know, which is true with every film, but particularly this film, I think, because I felt attached to this film pretty early on without knowing what I was attached to, I think.
Yeah, I was a little daunted doing this pod because it's like such a great but mysterious film. If I'm being honest, and I tried to like crack the film, I would just say that the film is powerful in its repetition. I think that they show the same dollies up the tilts up the stairs as she walks up, and as Mr. Chow walks up, you get the same shots of them crossing in the corridor. You get the same shots of them walking past each other in the noodle shop. I think this film is using like the secret stuff about film that is hard to talk about, which is like if you show something on screen, the audience knows that it's important, and yet they're not slapping you in the face with it, and yet you're also getting enough payoff that it's great. Like it's just such a well-honed film. Everything you see is important, but then I think I love the idea that everything you see is important, but it's not making you go, do you remember that one thing you saw? It's going, remember that thing you saw a bunch of times? Maybe if you look at it in this way, like everything changes.
Well, to comment on the repetition, like one of their earlier, role-playing things is like, I wonder how it started sort of thing. And then like when you kind of reflect on what you said, the repetition, like they pass each other in the hallways, they pass each other getting food, all that sort of stuff. And they kind of get closer as the movie goes on. It's kind of like, well, that's how it happens. Like you're just kind of around each other.
That's a really good point. It's funny. That's a good. Sorry, I'm actually just interrupting so I can praise Ben's point because he's such a genius. I didn't think of that.
Keep going.
That's my point.
Wow, it's even better the
Such a
second
good
time
point.
around.
Oh my god.
Okay. I need a good point song. Good point Ben song.
I think that you got a good point. Oh, I think that you got a real good point. And I just wanted to commend you on a really good point. Even though I probably could come up with it myself.
Well, because then you can kind of expand it into the fact that you don't see their partners the whole movie. So it's like, I mean, the whole thing it's the thing that they're away traveling, but they could have had the same sort of encounters that drew them together, but you don't really know.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but I feel like that relates to my theory, which is that it's trying to set up the ideal cheating circumstances. And
I hate the way you say that because it sounds like you're undermining so much.
Okay, okay. I'm just joking. What I wanted to say is that I think, well, that reminds me of the key thing they say, which is that they say we don't want to be like them. And whether you think they had sex or not, don't worry, it's fine. They might have in, one of the edits that we didn't see. I think the whole point is that there's this cruel irony that they don't want to do it the way that their partners did, but they are going to regardless, right? I think it is sort of this commentary on betrayal and how you can be in it for the right reasons, or you can feel a certain amount of rights, or like they feel like they have the right to cheat, whether they do or don't. But the thing is, people just like hurt each other, and her rejecting him is her hurting him, and she's hurting someone who she definitely doesn't want to hurt. Mm-hmm. It just has such a great sense of what people are like and what feelings are like. And I think what you said before was a great point, which is great point. Which is that the film leaves enough space for you to project yourself onto the characters.
Yeah. And
I don't know how you emulate that. And maybe that's part of the mystique of this film, because all the praise I'm reading and hearing about this film is from a foreign market, like maybe
exactly
like that. Yeah. That's what I was sort of getting at the start, where I was saying that my Blueberry Nights didn't work, because part of the beauty of this film, like, okay, hear me out. Everything that's so good about this film works because it's foreign. The story is foreign, but pretty relatable. The cultures are foreign, but they're just like a heightened sense of the same feelings and pressures that we feel in modern times. The settings themselves aren't particularly notable. Like, I'm sure if you lived in those sort of apartments, it wouldn't be the most interesting set. But to us, it is, because it's such a foreign place, right? I think so much of this film comes from the mood, the color, the culture, and that's just this film nailing every single thing. There's nothing that brings you out of the world.
Yeah, and the historical context is obviously super relevant even for somebody who doesn't particularly know what's going on. Like, it means something. You can tell it means something. It's set in a certain period. And, you know, even when he goes, where do they include that clip from? When he's in Cambodia, right? And they have about the president arriving and stuff like that. That's all really interesting. As someone who doesn't know the politics of Cambodia from the 60s, like, I don't know what's going on.
Well, also I don't know the politics of Hong Kong in the 60s because, you know, how they were all sort of moving out and like, oh, things are changing around here and it's
just to
different.
briefly do the like quick internet dive. I think that's the era when Britain were transferring ownership back to China,
Right.
which was a culturally significant. Well, so it didn't fully happen at once, and it still hasn't fully happened. Hong Kong is going back to China's country in 2046. That's the whole point. That's when that film's set. But Wong said in an interview that he grew up in this era of Hong Kong where a lot of the people were from China. So they were migrants from China and they had this baggage and memories of China and they were bringing it to Hong Kong.
Mm-hmm. I think I want to talk a little bit about specifics of the film because I definitely was confused by some of it. You know, as much as we've been praising the subtlety and space in a lot of it, there were parts where I wasn't really sure what was going on sometimes. Like some scenes where I was like, not sure what that was or who was speaking because it's just voices and stuff like that. And definitely the end of the film, I was not super sure. So
The Cambodia.
yeah, so he moves to Singapore, she goes to Singapore, and then she goes to his room. Is that what happens? She's in his room and touches his stuff?
Oh, yeah, because he's like, who took the thing from my room? And all you get is the cigarette with the lipstick.
Yeah, I was reading about that before. I think that the way it plays out is like he says initially, I'm moving to Singapore, I want you to come. And then he leaves, but then she goes to the hotel after he's already gone. So that's like that's her missing him at that chance.
Right.
And then she goes to Singapore, I'm guessing to see him, and then goes past his hotel room and tries to call him.
Well, she knows where he works, but then I think she's deliberately doing that. She's like, because she does the 3 rings, notable, because she mentioned that earlier. Yeah. But then he answers and she doesn't have the courage.
Right. Yeah, and then he goes to Cambodia and buries his secret in the...
Yeah, which is the reference to the
pink conversation, yeah. So I guess I wasn't that confused. It was just a Singapore thing that was a bit vague to me. But yeah, but the end is quite interesting, you know? I felt like this film was going to end after he rejected her and moved away, you know?
No, I like the epilogue.
I'm not saying I don't like it. I'm saying I thought.
I just think it's supposed to be like... it all comes to that quote at the end, which is funny because the quote is the 15 months thing that he could have done in 2 seconds. You know what I mean? Like, he contextualizes the story with these quotes at the start and the end of the film.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's all just about the fact that they were probably the best moments of this man's life, or at least the opportunities for him to be himself. And then there was a fleeting moment, you know?
Yeah.
That becomes the real sort of heartbreak of the film for him. Like that.
But then it's her too. It has to be.
Right. But then she has, like, who's her son with?
You'd assume Mr. Chan.
Right.
Yeah. I want to just say that one part I liked, and it's a specific thing I liked, obviously she inspired him to write his serials, martial arts serials, and then they're successful and they're contributing on together. And that was just super nice for some reason. I don't know why, but that just felt like something I hadn't seen in a film. A film doesn't often give you, you know, like it was like creative influence in a very positive way that wasn't like manic pixie dream girly. Do you know what I mean? Like it was like genuine support and genuine kind of inspiration from someone who, you know, I thought that was nice.
Yeah, well, it's the other angle why they were supposed to be together. You know, it's like...
Yeah, I think that's the thing that emotionally connected with me, maybe. As someone who's a pseudo-creative, it's like, I just found that quite beautiful, you know. I don't know. Do we have much else to say?
Alejandro Inarritu saw this film at Cannes with his wife. Very moving experience, apparently. They cried and were left speechless afterward. Well, they were speechless, and then his wife...
I hope they weren't speaking during the film.
Oh, God. They had a cry afterwards. He said it left... it was that moment that reminded him why. Okay, a little less profound than being the reason why. But it's the moment that reminded him why he wanted to be a filmmaker. So all I'm trying to say is that you can connect the dots between Ping and you know now that he's canon in Birdman universe. So
The type of love that I'm talking...
the type of love I'm talking about is absolute.
We'll do that film eventually because we think that it's somehow underrated even though it was an Oscar. It won Best Picture.
But
Still underrated.
the American-centric views that I've been listening to on a podcast or two is that Birdman was overrated. So,
Which is absolute nonsense. Yeah, I think that's probably the time. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe we should do a quick round table of like what emotionally connected with you the most from this film, if you feel like doing that. I don't know if you're interested in that.
absolutely.
I kind of gave my little spiel about that martial arts serial thing. I thought that was really great. And just, I don't know, something about the warmth of it that really translated super early on. It feels snugly, you know, this film, even though it's not necessarily happy, in my opinion, you know. I could imagine watching this again and enjoying watching it again and just being comfortable watching this again, you know?
I think like the sort of point I made before, like the way how the movie feels to get tighter and looser depending on what's going on is kind of really enjoyable. And then like you sort of are watching them, you know, get more familiar and spend time together, and it's really nice. And then when Mrs. Suen is like kind of shuts it down, it's kind of like, I guess we were rooting for them to cheat. Like it kind of snaps you back into reality a little bit there.
Yeah. For me, the stuff that hits, as I said, is that quote at the end about the memories. I love that they both found themselves in this very affecting moment in their lives and they shared it together, because it's quite interesting to think about people going through developmental moments and then no one else is on your page, you know. That's sort of the whole point.
Yeah.
So it's sort of lovely that they share this moment, but it's
exactly.
also tragic.
And obviously, the situation was horrible for them, but it also put them in a situation where they were less isolated than they would be otherwise if they were cheating with a random person, for example, which is interesting.
So it's like the melancholy of love, but not romance captured.
Yeah, and I just want to give a direct shout out to both of the performances by Maggie and Tony. Like, they were ace, like so good. I don't think we've specifically said that, so I just want to say that this film was very much carried by their performances.
Well, they hog most of the screen time. Significantly.
I know, give Mr. Ping more screen time.
What are you talking about?
All right, we're out of time. What did you like about this film, Tom?
What did I like? What didn't I like? I loved, my strongest praise is how succinct and deliberate the filmmaking is. And the thing that I marvel at the most, I think, like the thing that I'd try and adopt is the repetition. I think going, hey, like I'm lulling you into this like hypnotic thing is awesome. Yeah, I love the fact that the film challenges you to read into their stuff, but never in like an annoying way. It's never like it's so unique because it's not asking you to read into their lives outside of each other. It's asking you to read into their relationship. So I think innuendo in context of films is normally like, oh, this person's gone through a lot, or like, what does this person actually want out of this relationship? I think it's really cool how the film teases at these pieces of information, and it just hooks you to look closer, you know. It very much rewards you for like falling into the rhythm of it and trying to decode what they're saying, what it actually means to each other. Yeah, I love how controlled this film is, the mood it creates, and I think that's got to do with the motifs of the music and the motifs of the camera and the motifs of the actions that the characters do. So yeah, Motifs. Motifs are the big winner.
You're a big fan of motifs, generally, I would say.
I love a good motif. I love a good motif. I love a good motif.
That's a great point. Oh, that's a great point. All right, Ben. What worked for you in this film?
A lot of the same things Tom just mentioned. I think, like, we didn't talk about it a lot, but like with the music, which I guess you just did mention, like, I liked how that was very deliberate. Like, there was a lot of times where when they were having their conversations, there wasn't a whole lot of ambient noise. Like, it was just kind of them talking and that was it. But then when the music came in, it just seemed right, and like it really added to what was going on.
You know what's interesting that's just occurred to me is that it's a city film and then it's not like noisy, is it?
No.
And you don't go to the city.
Hmm.
It's basically suburbia in the city. Because it's even like suburban politics. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah,
like,
no, you're right. Neighbors sleeping together. Yeah. All right. Well, is there anything that didn't work for you, Ben?
I think that, not that
What would you change?
it didn't work. I just think, like, as I'm watching it, the ending, like you said, the ending isn't super clear. Like what happens in what order. And then I feel like there's probably some significance to that little bit of footage from Cambodia. That maybe it's the political undertones that I don't really know fully.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, likewise, I think we just don't understand what the significance of Cambodia, but it must have something. There's slight logic things like Mr. Ping.
$30.
No, man. Even what does he do? Does he work with him? Is he his buddy?
Feels like an uncle figure to me, but
Yeah, he's kind of
I don't know
random.
if that's the case.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd change anything. The only thing I'd change, extremely slight. She wears one of the dresses more than the others, and it slightly annoys me. She wears the green one with the lines on it, and obviously in month 9, they got a lot of good shots that month, so they kept wearing that dress. But it's just unfortunate.
Yeah. God, I can't stop thinking about the filming process. Like, you can't fault it when it's like a success, but it's just like, damn.
Yeah. What would I change? I would give back all those months to Chris Doyle. Poor guy.
I know. Well, it's like, we talk about it being a success, but it's like, you didn't make enough money for it to be worth 15 months of effort, did you?
Yeah, it's very much. So what's sort of.
And like, you could, I haven't seen Chunking yet, but I have heard as much praise for that as I have for this, really. So it's like, you could have got away without making this masterpiece and put people through a lot less hell, right?
Yeah. Anyway.
All right. Tom, what would you rate it?
Can I ask Ben first?
No, you're the person. You're the Wong man.
Yes. This is. Yeah. This is the one. This is a 5-star movie. I'm rating this 5
This is
stars.
Tom's first 5, I think.
Can I get some horns? Can I get a song?
You always. Oh.
5-star song.
Well,
5-star song.
I've given out 5s and I didn't give myself a song.
Yeah, but I like to save myself. I don't want to be like them.
I don't know. You spent 40 minutes talking about fucking frame rates today.
Yeah, and you loved it.
5 stars, baby, 5 stars, baby, 5 little stars.
Jesus Christ. All right. Ben, can you give us a less pretentious answer?
I was going to go 4.5.
Until.
And I still
And I
am.
still will. Nothing has changed.
All right.
What do you think the halves are? Just quickly.
It's hard. I know in previous episodes you've had lengthy discussions about the film rating process. I don't know. I just find
Is it a technical doc-in or a personal taste doc-in?
it's nothing that I can say this is why it's lost half a star.
It's the power of the 5 that you just need to know it.
I know 5 isn't like it's the perfect movie. Nothing is better than it, but it just yeah.
I get that. Yeah, and I don't know. This is just an interesting film. It's hard to. We've obviously spoken about it for a while now, but I also still find it hard to talk about because, like I was saying, I just don't think I had my finger on it yet, versus other ones where I feel like I've kind of worked out why I like it or whatever, or what it is particularly that connects with me. I don't know, but yeah, this is obviously amazing. It's just a unique feeling and a film. It just feels, without sounding like feeding into film mythology and stuff. Like, it feels masterful. Like, when you're watching, you're like, wow, this is like great filmmaking.
That's going to be like
in front of me.
uniqueness, right? Like,
yeah, I don't know. It's just it's filmmaking with feeling. You know what I mean? And it's obviously, I don't know. There's terrific performances, terrific themes, terrific story, terrific costumes and cinematography. There's just lots going for it. So I'm with Ben. I think it's a 4.5.
Particular reason for that half star?
Probably my confusion. No, I don't know. It's just a personal thing. I want to watch it again, which is the thing. Like, I'll watch it again and you'll see. I don't know. We'll see what happens.
That's a good point. Like, I would watch it again because I feel like there's something else I could get from it or notice.
Yeah, I just think
notice differently watching it.
It's an intimidating film. Like, I couldn't give it less than 5 because it's like I think it's perfect. I don't think it can be any better. My relationship will strengthen in the coming time period where I commit to the fact that it's a 5-star, and then I watch it and I'm like, yeah, this is amazing because I know it's amazing. It's so good.
So what league is it in for the viewers at home, listeners at home?
It's in the technical perfection category,
right?
Which is interesting. And I think you can...
So like Slane Castle.
I would also argue a thing that is like a little bit affecting of this film is that I feel like it's a worst kept secret. And I think sometimes you want to feel like you're in on something. So I think that...
that
can affect your perspective of this film.
And it wasn't in 4.3, which is a big letdown for me personally.
It doesn't look as good. 115 months of wasted footage. But yeah, anyway, it is an amazing film. It is the type of film, if you had to make someone a list of movies to make, I think to watch, you'd put that film on the list.
Yeah, look, I am looking forward to doing another Wong film, and I think we'll have Ben back on, and hopefully we'll be less intimidated by it now that we're over this hurdle, I guess.
This is a hard film. And that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
We're growing as a pod.
We're challenging ourselves.
Yeah, we're taking down the video essay, people, one take at a time.
I know, because like you can't just rock up to IMAX and say 1 ticket for Kong vs. Godzilla without, prepping yourself.
See, I just think that Kong vs. Godzilla is going to be probably the first technical and personal 5-star I've experienced.
Emotional.
I'm just very excited. Anything else you plug in besides the Kong
Have you
episode?
watched all of the preceding movies of Kong and
I've watched
Godzilla?
none of them.
You come in with no background.
Yeah.
God, I almost want to... We need to make
we'll
sure
do it.
we need
Yeah.
midnight screening tickets, surely.
Yeah.
Follow
us at I'm Good Brother, the official home of
we
Ego
got to give
Problem
our
and
guests
Ego
a
Hour
chance to
podcast.
plug anything.
I have nothing to plug.
But anything you want to say?
Well, I guess thanks for having me on here again. I will happily come on again anytime.
All right. So, yeah, follow us on
I'm Good Brother.
everything.
And I'm Good Brother on Instagram, which is very important. I don't know why, but it is.
I don't know if you were listening, but follow us on at I'm Good Brother.
And yeah, please, just
Tell a friend.
just tell one person to listen to us. If you were recommending someone to listen to one of our episodes, which episode would you recommend?
Can I say Kong vs. Godzilla? Or is
Yeah, you can plug Kong vs. Godzilla.
It's going to be a big episode.
It's huge.
It's the showdown of a century.
It's bigger than Ben-Hur, as they say.
It's been another classic.
Another classic. Another classic. Or a fresh one. If we knew what we wanted, you'd be useless. Tell us what's in. Tell us who's done. Another antique shipwreck you spun. It's a Friday.